This was war. The kind nobody warns you about because it happens inside your own family, behind closed doors, between people who share your last name. Before I tell you what happened that night, I need to know something. What time is it where you're listening to this, and where are you? I'm asking because I want you to remember this moment, the ordinary one before you heard my story, because I had one of those too, right up until 3:42 in the morning on a Tuesday in November. If your brother showed up at your door bleeding and your father texted you to turn him away, what would you do? Sit with that for a second. Really, sit with it. Because I thought I knew the answer until I lived it. My name is Hannah Whitlock. I'm 31 years old. I work as a nurse practitioner at Brigham and Women's in Boston. And until 2 years ago, I thought my family was complicated but normal. Loud Thanksgivings. Passive-aggressive Christmas cards. The usual American dysfunction. My father, Richard, ran a commercial real estate firm in Back Bay. My mother passed when I was 19. My younger brother, Caleb, was the golden boy until a forklift at a warehouse job crushed his right leg below the knee when he was 26. He got a prosthetic. He got a settlement. And then, somehow, he got a wife named Brianna, who I never trusted from the first dinner I shared with her. That Tuesday night, I was on call. I just finished charting at the kitchen counter of my apartment in Brookline when I heard it. Not a knock. 3 slow, dragging thuds against my front door, like somebody was using a body to make the sound. I froze with my coffee halfway to my mouth. When I opened the door, my brother was on his knees in the hallway. His prosthetic was twisted at an angle I knew was wrong, the socket cracked and leaking gel down his jeans. He was holding my nephew Jonah against his chest. Jonah was 5 years old, in pajamas with little fire trucks on them, and he was so hot I could feel the heat coming off his forehead from 3 feet away. "Hannah," Caleb said. His voice was a whisper that had been crying for a long time. "Please, I think he has a seizure starting. She wouldn't let me take him." I didn't think. I just moved. I got my arms under Jonah and lifted him, and I felt the dry sandpaper heat of his skin and the rapid little flutter under his jaw, and the nurse part of me ran a calculation I didn't even hear out loud. Probably 104. Probably febrile seizure risk in the next 30 minutes if I didn't get his temperature down. Caleb was trying to crawl into my apartment behind me, dragging his ruined leg, and I shouted at him to just stay. Just lean against the wall. I'd come back for him. I put Jonah on my couch, and I stripped him down to his diaper, and yes, my nephew was still in pull-ups at 5, because Brianna had told everyone for 2 years he was almost there and never bothered with training him. I ran cold washcloths from the kitchen sink. I got the ibuprofen out of my bag, did the weight-based dose in my head, gave him a syringe of cherry-flavored suspension, and watched him swallow it like he was too exhausted to even cry. His little chest was heaving. There was a yellow crust around one of his nostrils that I'd come to learn later was untreated impetigo. That's when my phone buzzed on the counter. I almost didn't look. But the screen lit up and I saw the name. Dad. The preview said, "I know he's on his way to you." I picked it up. There were 3 messages in a row. "Don't take in that cripple. He's already destroyed himself. Don't let him drag you down too. The boy needs to stay with his mother. You have no right. Brianna is family." He stopped being family the day he gave up. I read those messages 3 times. I felt something in my chest go very, very still. Like all the noise of my life up to that point had been one frequency, and now I was tuned to another one, and the new frequency was so quiet, it sounded like a knife being slid out of a drawer. My father had been a Marine. He used to say, "Whitlocks don't quit." When Caleb lost his leg, when he was lying in that hospital bed at Mass General with a stump wrapped in gauze, our father came to visit exactly twice. The second time he told my brother, "You need to figure out how to be useful again." Those were his words to a 26-year-old who just lost a limb. I remember Caleb's face. I remember thinking, that's not going to leave him. And it didn't. I called 911. I told the operator my name, my address, that I had a 5-year-old with a fever of approximately 104 degrees and signs of dehydration and possible early-stage febrile seizure, and that I also had an adult male with a fractured prosthetic socket and what appeared to be a broken rib based on his breathing pattern. I gave her the exact time, 3:51 a.m. She told me units would be at my building within 7 minutes. They arrived in 5. The fire department came first, the paramedics 90 seconds behind them. While I was on the phone, I was also doing something else. I had set my phone on speaker on the coffee table, and I had grabbed my work tablet and I was photographing everything. Jonah's body, the bruise shaped like a thumbprint on the back of his upper arm, the faint pink ring around his wrist that I recognized as the kind of burn you get from being held under hot tap water. Caleb in the hallway, his pant leg pulled up to show his stump where the gel liner was supposed to be cushioning it. Except the liner was missing. He'd been walking on raw silicone against scar tissue. I photographed his ribs when he lifted his shirt, and there was a boot print, an actual tread pattern, dark purple, low on his left side. The paramedics were 2 women, one older, one younger. They were professionals. They moved Jonah onto a pediatric gurney and started a line on him in my living room before they'd even gotten to the elevator. The older one looked at the photos on my tablet for about 4 seconds and said quietly, "We're going to need a social worker at the ER. I'm calling it in now." Her name was Diane, and I will love her until the day I die. A Brookline PD officer arrived at 3:58. His name tag said Reyes. He was maybe 28, soft-spoken, the kind of cop who knew he wasn't going to fix anything in one night but was going to make sure he did his part right. He took my statement. He took Caleb slowly, while Caleb sat on my entryway floor with a blanket around his shoulders, waiting for the second ambulance. He photographed everything I'd already photographed, plus more. He logged the case number. He wrote down Brianna's full name, her address in Quincy, the address of the property my father co-owned with her, the fact that my brother's settlement check from the warehouse accident had been 17 months ago for $412,000, and the fact that according to Caleb, the joint account currently held approximately $1,100. I want you to understand something. I am a nurse. I have been a mandatory reporter for almost a decade. I have made reports for kids whose injuries were less obvious than what I was looking at on my couch. The system isn't perfect. I know that. People in the comments are going to say the system fails children, and they're right, it does. But it does not always fail. That night in Brookline, it did not fail. By 4:30 in the morning, while Jonah was getting IV fluids and a CT scan at Boston Children's, a DCF emergency response social worker named Marcus was already on his way to the ER. By 5:15, I had given a recorded statement. By 6:00, a temporary emergency custody order had been put in place, Jonah in my care pending investigation. They did that because I'm family, because I'm medical, because I had documentation, and because the photos I took were time-stamped and geotagged. Caleb went to Beth Israel in a separate ambulance. They confirmed 2 fractured ribs, one of them displaced. They confirmed the stump had a deep tissue infection from being abraded without a proper liner for what looked like weeks. They admitted him for IV antibiotics. He cried when they hooked up the morphine, not from the pain, from relief. My phone buzzed again at 6:47 a.m. while I was in a waiting room at Children's holding a vending machine coffee I couldn't drink. It was my father. "You've made a mistake. You don't know what you've done." I didn't reply. I muted the conversation. Then I screenshotted it and texted the screenshot to Officer Reyes, who had given me his card and told me to send anything that came in. By that afternoon, I had a lawyer. Her name was Priya Chandrasekaran, and she was a friend of a friend, a family law attorney in Cambridge who took my call at 1 in the afternoon and was sitting across from me at her conference table by 4. I want to be specific about this because people online sometimes act like getting a lawyer is some kind of magic that regular people can't access. It isn't. I called 3 numbers. The third one called me back in 20 minutes. Priya was direct. She said, "Hannah, I need to know what you want. Tell me the outcome." I told her I wanted 3 things. I wanted Jonah safe and with someone who loved him. I wanted my brother to get back what had been taken from him. And I wanted my father to understand that what he had texted me would be read out loud in a room with consequences. She wrote those down on a yellow legal pad. Then she said, "Okay, now let's talk about how." What I learned over the next 4 months changed how I see my family forever. My sister-in-law had not just been controlling Caleb's finances, she had set up power of attorney paperwork 2 months after his amputation, when he was still on heavy painkillers, and she had used it to move the bulk of his settlement into a joint investment account that she'd then drained through a series of transfers to an LLC she'd registered in Delaware. The LLC was paying the mortgage on a condo in Quincy that my father co-signed for, in his name, but which Brianna lived in alone 3 nights a week. The story she told my brother was that they needed the condo as a rental property for income. The reality was that she was sleeping there with a man named Trevor who worked at my father's real estate firm. Read that again. The man my father told me was real family had been sleeping with one of my father's employees in a condo my father had co-signed, while my brother lay in their main house in Norwood with no prosthetic liner, no antibiotics, no infant Tylenol for his own son. My father knew. He had to have known. The condo had been his idea. I'm not going to pretend I figured all this out by myself. Priya hired a forensic accountant. Officer Reyes handed the financial side of the case to a detective in the Norfolk County DA's office. My job was simpler. My job was to keep Jonah safe. Jonah came home with me 3 days after that night. The DCF emergency placement turned into a kinship foster placement, which after the criminal investigation broadened, turned into something more permanent. I bought a toddler bed and a dresser at IKEA on a Saturday, and I cried in the parking lot for 10 minutes before I drove home. Not sad crying, the other kind. The kind where your body is finally putting down something it didn't know it had been carrying. Jonah didn't talk for the first 8 days he lived with me. He nodded, he pointed. He cried quietly at night and tried to hide it under his pillow. On the 9th day, he was eating mac and cheese at my kitchen counter, and he looked up and said, "Aunt Hannah, can I have apple juice, please?" His voice was small and clear, and he said, "Please," the way kids do when they've been hit for not saying it. I poured him apple juice. I sat down across from him and I said, "Buddy, you don't have to say please for everything. You can just ask." He thought about that for a long time. Then he nodded once like he was filing it away for later. He started talking more after that. He told me, in the way 5-year-olds tell things, about the closet where his mom put him sometimes. About how Daddy used to read him books before Daddy got hurt, and then Daddy was sad all the time. About how Grandpa Richard came over and always brought Mommy flowers and never looked at him. Never looked at him. My nephew said that. About my father. The first court date was a preliminary hearing in February. Brianna showed up in a navy suit with her hair pulled back, and she looked like a kindergarten teacher. Her lawyer was expensive and good. He argued that she had been overwhelmed, that postpartum depression had compounded across years, that the financial situation was a misunderstanding between spouses. He was professional. He almost convinced me, briefly, that I had imagined the boot print on my brother's ribs. Then the prosecutor put the photos on the screen. I watched my sister-in-law's face when the picture of Caleb's stump came up. The infected tissue. The way you could see the bone shape under the swelling. She didn't flinch. She tilted her head slightly, the way you do when you're trying to remember whether you left the stove on. That was the moment I understood that she had never loved my brother. Not in any month of any year of their marriage. He had been a paycheck with legs, and then with one leg, and then a paycheck with no legs at all, and at some point the math had stopped working for her. My father was not at the first hearing. He sent a lawyer with a statement. The statement said he had been unaware of the financial irregularities and was cooperating fully with investigators. The statement was also a lie. We knew that because the forensic accountant had already traced 2 emails from his work address authorizing transfers. He was indicted in April. Conspiracy to commit financial exploitation of a disabled adult and aiding and abetting fraud. In Massachusetts, those charges carry real time. They aren't symbolic. He hired a different lawyer, an expensive one from a firm in the financial district, and that lawyer called me twice asking if I would speak to my father. The second time I told him, very calmly, that any communication from my father needed to come through Priya, and that if he contacted me again, I would file for a harassment order. He did not contact me again. The criminal trial for Brianna was in late June. It lasted 6 days. I testified on the third day. I wore a black dress and the pearl earrings my mother had left me. I was asked to describe what I saw on November 14th at 3:42 in the morning, and I described it. I described my brother on his knees. I described my nephew's fever. I described my nephew's fever. I described the texts. The prosecutor put the texts on the screen and asked me to read the one from my father aloud. I read it. Don't take in that cripple. He's already destroyed himself. Don't let him drag you down, too. There was a sound in the courtroom that I'll never forget. It wasn't a gasp. It was about 30 people exhaling at the same time, the kind of breath you let out when a thing you suspected turns out to be exactly as ugly as you thought. Brianna was convicted on 5 counts. Financial exploitation, 2 counts of child neglect, 1 count of misdemeanor assault, and a count of perjury for things she'd said in her deposition. She got 6 years, eligible for parole at 3.5. She served the first months at MCI Framingham. The civil case to recover Caleb's settlement money settled out of court in August for $348,000, most of which the forensic accountant managed to recover from various accounts. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. My father pleaded out in September. He didn't want a trial. He took 3 years probation, $120,000 in restitution, and the loss of his real estate license. He had to sell the Back Bay firm. He moved to a smaller place in Newton. I have not seen him in person since the November, before that Tuesday night. He sent me a Christmas card last year. I threw it away without opening it. I don't know if that makes me cold. I don't care if it does. Caleb lives with me and Jonah now. We bought a house in Newton, actually not far from where my father ended up, which Caleb finds darkly funny. We have a small yard. Caleb has a new prosthetic, a good one, fitted by a specialist at Spalding Rehab. He started doing intake work at a veterans nonprofit even though he's not a veteran, because they liked his story and they liked him. He goes to therapy on Tuesdays. I go on Thursdays. Jonah goes on Saturdays to a child psychologist named Dr. Lou, who has a sandbox in her office and the patience of a saint. Jonah is 7 now. He's in 2nd grade. He reads at a 4th grade level. He calls me Aunt Hannah, and he calls my brother Dad. He's allowed to. I officially have shared legal custody with Caleb, an arrangement that took 6 months of paperwork and that I would do again tomorrow. Last month, he lost his first tooth on a piece of pizza at a Bruins game, and Caleb cried in the stadium. I have a photo. I look at it when I get tired. The night after the verdict, Caleb and I sat on the back porch of the apartment I had then, and we drank cheap beer, and he didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, I almost didn't come to your door that night. I thought you'd say what Dad said. I told him I knew. I told him I had thought about that too. About all the years he must have spent wondering which of us he could trust. About the silence that families build around their broken people, the way we agree without agreeing that some of us don't count. He said, Why did you let me in? And I said, because the only thing I have ever known how to do when somebody bleeds on my doorstep is open the door. That's it. That's the whole thing. There's no special skill. There's no courage. There's just a doorknob and a hand and a choice you make in about 2 seconds, and then you live with that choice for the rest of your life. I made the right one. I would make it again tonight. I would make it if it were my father on the other side of that door, which is something I think about sometimes, and which I haven't yet answered for myself. But here's what I want you to take from this. If somebody you love is being told they're a burden, listen to who's telling them that. Listen carefully. Sometimes the person calling your sibling a cripple is the person profiting from them being one. Sometimes the people who say, family is family, mean, be quiet so I can keep what I'm taking. And sometimes the only family you have left, after the dust settles, is the one you choose to build at 3 a.m. with a child on your couch and a phone in your hand. I dialed 911 that night. I would dial it again. I would dial it 1,000 times. If this happened to you, I think you would too. I think about that doorknob a lot. The cheap brass one on my old Brookline apartment, the one I turned at 3:42 in the morning without knowing I was turning my whole life with it. 2 seconds. That was the entire moral weight of what happened next. 2 seconds to decide whether my brother was a person or a problem. What I've come to understand, slowly, is that nothing in our family arrived by accident that night. Caleb did not collapse on my doorstep because of bad luck. He collapsed because for 2 years my father had quietly taught everyone around him that a man with one leg was a man with less value, and Brianna had simply followed that lesson to its profitable end. People do what they're permitted to do. My father permitted her. My silence at every Thanksgiving where I watched him not look at his own son permitted her too. I don't get to pretend I had clean hands before that Tuesday. I had quiet hands, which isn't the same thing. The cause was contempt dressed up as discipline. The effect was a 5-year-old with a fever of 104 in fire truck pajamas. That's the whole equation. You cannot tell a man for 2 years that he's worthless and then act surprised when the people in his house treat him that way. What I learned is that decency is not a feeling, it's a muscle. And like any muscle, it gets weaker when you don't use it. My father had let his atrophy until it could not lift a single text message in his son's defense. I had let mine soften, too, just enough to keep the peace at family dinners, and I'm not going to lie to you and say I forgive myself for that yet. I'm still working on it. Jonah deserves an aunt who works on it. But I also learned this. Courage is not loud. It does not look like what the movies showed me. Courage that night was a doorknob and a phone and a tablet camera and a willingness to write down the time. Courage was Caleb crawling 6 city blocks on a fractured prosthetic because some quiet part of him still believed one person in his family might open the door. He was right. Barely. By 2 seconds. If you take anything from my story, take this. Pay attention to who calls the weak people in your family burdens, because that person is almost always the one feeding on them. Watch your own mouth when you talk about the brother who is struggling, the sister who got sick, the parent who is failing. The words we use about people we love are the permission slips we hand to people who want to hurt them. I open the door now, every time. I don't always know what's on the other side, and I am not always brave when I turn the handle. But I have stopped waiting to feel ready. Ready is a thing you build after you act, not before. Caleb taught me that, without ever meaning to, by being the one who knocked.